Ladies and gentlemen, the boys are back, two-thirds of us at least. The show has come full circle. Because about a year ago, around this time, our same two faces, one of us handsome, one of us not so much. Obviously, Justin's the handsome
It's
one.
rude. Oh, okay, never mind.
This time a year ago, the two of us just randomly hopped on Twitter one day live and we said, let's talk some football. And a year later, we're still doing this. Ain't ain't life a beautiful thing, ladies and gentlemen? And it's evolved into what is now presently your favorite NFL podcast that has returned after a several week hiatus. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Like I said, two-thirds of us joining you. We'll get to the third guy who ain't here in a little bit. But first, entering the show, as always, Iceman Jurg, joined alongside me by my guy. We started this a year ago. Justin, how we doing, brother?
It's good to be back. You know, so much has happened. Really excited to talk about it.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why we did take some time off, because we knew when we would come back, we would get a lot to talk about. And again, this mirrors a year ago. We're talking about free agency. We're talking a little draft this time. And per tradition, Justin, when you and me do an episode to start off a season, the Cowboys make a move at receiver. Last year was just getting rid of Amari Cooper. And now this time it's acquiring a guy who we're going to get to here in a couple moments. So I think that's a beautiful thing.
Like right as it happened too, like right as we were going on. That's wild.
It's every single time. So someone at the Dallas Cowboys must be a fan of the show. They must have gotten the feeling
they wanted us to have news.
Exactly. We appreciate that. We do appreciate that. Will that make us be tempted to pick the Cowboys to win the division next year? Probably not, but we'll see. Speaking of which,
before that prediction comes.
Oh yeah, we got plenty of time. We got plenty of roster changes that still need to happen. But speaking of rosters, ladies and gentlemen, of course, our third member isn't here with us. The most chaotic part, arguably, of the show. I think it's usually between me and Rick on a weekly basis on who likes causing the most chaos. Podfather Rick is not here because, ladies and gentlemen, so and this is the thing, Justin. So during this offseason, I would like to do this before the draft personally. We need to do our bracket because, yes, ladies and gentlemen, funny enough, March Madness is happening. We need to do a bracket to decide Podfather Rick's new team going forward. So to prepare himself for that inevitability, Justin's face, to prepare himself for that inevitability, Rick went on he didn't say how many days, he just said he went on a darkness retreat. Now, Justin, real quick, before we get to the actual news here, because it's fun football cast. We don't have games for you all today, but we are going to talk about this. Justin, what is Rick going to look like after this darkness retreat? Because to me personally, I know logically it doesn't make sense, but the show doesn't necessarily always follow logic. I would love if somehow, some way, Rick comes out with a beard that's similar to our lengths right now. I know it's not going to happen, but I just think it would be funny.
You ever see Hot Tub Time Machine where at the very end, I forget the actor's name, the bald guy, all of a sudden he's got like this long hair and he's like wearing the robe and just looks like he's taken a lot of ayahuasca. That's what Rick's gonna look like.
So you're telling me after all this time, after all the criticism of Aaron Rodgers, he's going to look like Aaron Rodgers?
Well, what do you think a darkness retreat does?
It changes a man up, apparently. Oh my god. Well, again, he didn't tell us. How many days do you think he's gone for this darkness retreat?
He's been in there the whole time since we left. He went in that day,
yeah.
And he came out. He's coming out. Not coming out until our next podcast.
Yeah, that's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. Rick is not coming out until literally like hours before we record the show.
It's like the groundhog when he comes out and he sees his shadow. Football season officially started.
Oh my god, it's so true. It's so true. Oh my god. So next week will be Groundhog Podfather Day on the show, ladies and gentlemen. You'll see. Maybe we'll get more moves. Maybe if he sees his shadow, another big trade will break next week in the draft. Who knows? Because things can still be happening in the draft. Speaking of which, ladies and gentlemen. Transition. We're going to start off with this move. We're going to get to free agency. Don't worry. We're going to talk about the teams and the teams who have been the most active and some of the bigger names who have signed specifically, although some of that might intertwine, but we'll cross the bridge when we get there. But speaking of crossing bridges, ladies and gentlemen, the Carolina Panthers crossed the bridge themselves. The Dave Tepper, the owner who's been there for the last couple of years, ever since buying the team from Jerry Richardson a couple of years ago, I think Justin, for all our conversations that we've had, whether it be off the show or even on the show, I think we've always agreed that the thing that Dave Tepper personally has wanted this team to get the last couple of years is the franchise quarterback. And there's only so many ways you can acquire / get a franchise quarterback, and getting the number one pick in the draft is one of them. Now, the Carolina Panthers, they weren't that bad this season. They were bad, but they weren't that bad, especially with the run Steve Wilkes tried to lead them on at the end of the year. And they ended up getting, I believe it was originally the 9th overall pick. And they were like, you know what? No, that's not good enough. So Dave Tepper, I'm sure he had to have green lighted this. Told the GM, "Hey, do what you got to do. Get that number one overall pick," and it's happened. The Carolina Panthers have traded with the Chicago Bears for the number one pick in this upcoming draft. I have the full trade details here. So the Chicago Bears trade that number one overall pick to the Carolina Panthers in exchange for the ninth overall pick this year. As I mentioned, a 2023 second round pick, the 61st overall pick. That is the pick that the Panthers got from the 49ers trade of Christian McCaffrey. A first round pick in 2024, a second round pick in 2025, and DJ Moore. Unexpected portion of that trade, to say the very least. Sure, we have thoughts on this. No videos from Rick this week, ladies and gentlemen, because in a darkness retreat, you're unable to get the connection to send the videos. So we'll just assume. I don't even know what we could assume as, but we'll get to Rick's assumptions later on here. Justin, we start with you. What did everything that you thought of this trade? I don't really know about giving a winner and losers because literally this trade just happened still. And we're really not going to know the true results of it for years down the line once all these guys are actually in the league, especially the 2025 second round pick that the Bears got. But, initial thoughts, Chicago trading down, which I think the show kind of expected. I think we all expected that to happen. But the Carolina Panthers being the team that ends up, paying the price, paying the piper, we could say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting. They gave up a lot. You can't necessarily say that it's not worth the pick that they got because obviously this is supposed to be one of the stronger QB drafts in memory. There's a lot of guys at the top that people are looking for, but it's certainly a strong way to start your regime. I mean, I don't necessarily know if I love giving up all of that draft capital, especially with a team that had needs. But you just brought in a quarterback whisperer head coach, and excuse me, you have a brand new team that you're setting up. They've made a couple of decent signings in, I believe they signed Miles Sanders from Philly, and they made some defensive signings as well. And they had a pretty good defense last year. The only issue that I see now is who are you going to throw the ball to? I mean, you were devoid at receiver last year with DJ Moore being your only guy, and you just got rid of him. So now there's no Robbie Anderson there. Or I'm sorry, Chosen Anderson. You traded Christian McCaffrey. I know the offensive line played well and you had a really good running game and all that, but you gotta have someone that's going to catch the ball. So it's going to be interesting to see who they pick and how it works out there, and what Frank Reich does with all of these moves that they're making early in his tenure in there.
Absolutely, to say the very least. So when it comes to the actual trade in and of itself, I thought it was actually relatively fair. Because I looked at other number one overall pick trades more recently over the last decade or so. And at least the draft pick compensation portion of it, I think is per the status quo. You look at when the Eagles traded up even to the number two overall pick to get Carson Wentz, they traded a future first round pick in that deal. The Los Angeles Rams, were they still in St. Louis at that point? No, I think that may have been year one in LA. When they trade up with the Tennessee Titans, I sadly have to mention that team on this show again, to get to the number one overall pick to trade for Jared Goff. They traded a future first round pick and a future third round pick in that deal as well. I know this is kind of an outlier because I don't want to say overpaid, but the Washington Commanders, back when they were a different name, named the Reskins is what I'll call them, when they traded up with the then St. Louis Rams, God, a lot of teams with different names or different cities, to get the number two overall pick to get RG3. Even with teams trading up for just their quarterbacks, the Kansas City Chiefs trading up with, people forget, the Buffalo Bills to get the pick to get Patrick Mahomes. They traded both their first round picks they had in that draft and some other depth picks. Was it who else? Either Josh Allen or Deshaun Watson. One of those two teams traded up. I think it may have been the Texans trading up with the Browns. So there is a recent history here. I'm not talking about going far, far back like we do in our trivia sometimes, or Rick's mind-blowing fact of the week, which sadly we don't get that this week. But we're talking about draft pick compensation. This is actually par for the course of trading up, especially for a first overall pick. Because at the end of the day, yes, the ninth overall pick is still a top 10 pick. Yes, the ninth overall pick is still a good pick. But it's still the first overall pick. And whatever way we want to dice it, the first overall pick is always going to be, in theory, the most valuable pick in a draft that can net you the highest possible return for you getting it. That's why we were talking about, were the Bears most likely just going to trade down with that to get and accumulate more assets? And they did that. First and second this year, first round pick in 2024, which who knows what's going to happen next season with the Panthers, especially in that division. And the second round pick in 2025. realistically, that could just be used as a trade chip down the line if the Bears are good enough to try to make a run at the playoffs. Maybe not this next season, but the year after. They could use a second round pick to get a guy, maybe someone better than Chase Claypool. I'm just saying, but who would do that?
Chase Claypool would be a good number 2, though.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, now they have a number 1, and that to me, that's the biggest thing. The only aspect I don't like of what the Carolina Panthers had to give up in this deal, and I know you agree with this, is DJ Moore. I felt that part of the reason why they gave up DJ Moore was to avoid giving up more depth picks, because all the previous trades that I mentioned here, none of them had a player going back the other way. But the thing is, if you break down the trades, there's a lot of depth picks going there. And so maybe, and this is just my theory, I don't know your thoughts, Justin. I think part of the reason, for whatever reason, that Carolina gave up DJ Moore was to try to avoid giving up another future first or second round pick.
Well, I think it's interesting because if you remember when they were trading off assets before the trade deadline last season, there were 2 players that were unavoidable. It was the kid on the defensive line,
Burns, right?
Burns, and DJ Moore. They were the 2 players that they were like, no, this is who we're building our future around. And then, lo and behold, they end up firing their interim coach. They go in a different direction, and now they have a chance at choosing whatever quarterback they want in a quarterback-heavy draft. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, DJ, it's been good. We signed you to an extension last year, but you can go play that out somewhere else. So I'm not sure if DJ Moore maybe had a reason to want to get out of there. Maybe he didn't want to be part of a rebuild. Maybe the head coaches didn't have, or the new coaching regime didn't have him in their plans. But, it's a wild about face for them, really, considering, how highly they praised him and how long he's been there. And signing an extension.
Do you think any part of that potentially, Justin, could be the fact, I know this is probably part of the same guy who thought this, back at the trade deadline, but their general manager, Scott Fitterer, he was not the guy that drafted DJ Moore. Now, to be fair, he's not the guy that drafted a good chunk of these players for the most part. But could that have played any role? Do you think that the thought process came past his mind that, yes, it sucks to trade a number 1 guy, but we can make do with this for now? Do you think that could have played a reason?
I mean, it's one of those teams that I always thought had depth but didn't have starters. Like, their low-end talent was higher than the average, but they didn't have those huge playmaking ability guys that a team needs at least one of generally. And that's not to say that these guys can't turn into those guys, because they're young in the receiving core, but you just haven't seen it yet. So, I mean, you're going to look for guys to kind of take a step forward this year. It's not like it's a very heavy free agency,
right?
As in terms of receiver. I mean, even like the upper echelon guys have kind of already made moves. So it'll be interesting to see which direction they go. If they try to draft, maybe if they try to trade for a receiver. DeAndre Hopkins is being touted out there. So we'll see exactly what direction they go in. And if they can end up with, one of these strong players.
Right. And also, I mean, you mentioned guys that could be on the block, not just DeAndre Hopkins, but the Denver Broncos have made it apparent that they are willing to listen to trade offers for both Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, I'm being told that those are really high. They just traded all their assets.
Right. So we'll see what happens there. But clearly the Carolina Panthers, the goal was simple. Get the franchise quarterback. Get the guy. You haven't had the franchise quarterback necessarily since, I know he still had one more good year after, but you haven't had a franchise quarterback there since 2015 Cam Newton, when he was the MVP, when you made it to the Super Bowl, and you lost to the Denver Broncos.
He was really never the same after that.
Oh, yeah. It was that. It was also, I want to say 1 or 2 years later, he got that one last injury that was just, it was it for his career and the player he used to be. Which sucked, because Prime Cam Newton was very much a different beast, to say the very least.
Exciting.
Oh, yeah. So that's the thing with the Carolina Panthers portion of it. I don't part of the reason why I bring it up is because I don't necessarily like people saying that the Bears fleeced them. I don't necessarily think this is a fleece. I think there was I think the picks used were about value if you look at recent number one overall pick trades. It's just the DJ Moore portion, I think, is what has people calling it a fleece, which on that aspect, I understand. But again, like, I don't necessarily think it's a fleece. If they hit on this pick, you got your franchise quarterback, that's worth it.
Well, it depends on how both quarterbacks play, because Justin Fields, for however well he played last year, his completion percentage and his accuracy was poor. He made some very, very good throws, and he didn't have a lot of receivers. He didn't have help on his offensive line. I understand that, but the numbers weren't really there. I mean, I think he had the least amount of completions per starting quarterback in the season last year. DJ Moore can help that, but if DJ Moore comes along and Justin Fields is the same player, which, again, he was electric for a time, but they didn't win a lot of games, obviously.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, maybe Carolina looks like they won that trade. Maybe this is one of those trades where it looks like heavy compensation, but until you see the players picked and how they play, you really can't say who won and who lost. Because if Carolina doesn't hit their guy, of course they lost. Right. It's just the way it is. If Carolina hits their guy and Chicago doesn't work out, and in 3 years they're using one of those picks to pick another quarterback, obviously Carolina. This is one of those trades that both teams can win and both teams can lose.
Yeah.
So it'll depend on the way these teams draft and how Justin Fields works out, how the quarterbacks play out. And I'm excited to see it. I think we'll see an impact immediately, actually, year one. So we'll know very soon.
Right. Well, funny enough, Justin, because you mentioned it, a lot of people have brought up the idea of what last year was supposed to be and kind of was for Tua in terms of the Dolphins season going in. A lot of people are equating that now to Justin Fields for this upcoming season. So for the sake of it, because you mentioned it, Justin Fields last season was just over 60% on his completion percentage for his games. 60% 10 years ago would have been really good. In today's game, though,
not terrible.
But in today's game,
throw a lot of passes either. He ran the ball like a ton.
Well, 318 attempts. They probably will want to see that number rise. I will say that much. Yeah, he really did run the ball a lot. 160 rushing attempts for over 1,000 yards, 1,143 to say the very least. But no, so that is the logic that I've seen some people put into this trade, because the thing is, Justin, is that now you have 2 first-round picks this year, this next draft. You have now 2 second-round picks in the 2025 draft with both yours and the Carolina Panthers, with your own pick in 2025. If Justin Fields doesn't work out, I'm not saying we want that, because we like Justin Fields on the show. This is a pro Justin Fields show. We relatively speaking, there is the potential for the Chicago Bears to quickly rectify their mistake, a la the Arizona Cardinals trading up. Well, they didn't have to trade up; they got the pick naturally, and taking Kyler Murray over Josh Rosen. Now, I know different circumstances, new coach came in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Matt Eberflus, in theory, should get a year 3, unless they go like 1-16 this year. But at the same time, like, there is still that potential. So I do wonder that for people. But, we brought up a lot of teams here. And I think for the most part, we kind of, you kind of said it best, Justin, like, because the Bears got a number of picks, like, yes, this is great value. We literally can't say anything until they make these draft picks. So
they're a young team with a lot of cap space. They're making a ton of moves this offseason. It's going to be a very different team next year. It's almost like last year was kind of like that year 1 Joe Douglas year with the Jets, where he was hired halfway through the season. None of his guys were there. He didn't have his own head coach. It's like, this is a freebie. Let's see what you do with these guys. We'll see who stays next year. And next year will be your real first year as the head coach here. And we'll see exactly how you can turn this thing around.
Right. I agree. And, you brought it up perfectly, Justin. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we say in the business, transition. The most active teams in free agency so far, the Chicago Bears have been one of them, and Carolina Panthers as well. So we can kind of keep the conversation going to an extent, but we're going to separate these teams a little bit. Let's start with the Chicago Bears, Justin, because you said it best. This is the dream of a GM who, I think he's like, I know he came in last year, but I think this was the first real offseason for Ryan Poles, because he had a year to evaluate the roster he had. I always think that for a GM, the first year after their first season is their true test, because that's when they got to reevaluate everything. They got to evaluate their coaches. They got to evaluate the roster that they inherited and some of the guys that they may have been able to acquire. This was it for Ryan Poles. And what a interesting first offseason, to say the very least, getting that treasure trove of picks and a great player in DJ Moore. But he added to that in free agency here with some of the big-time names possible, like PJ Walker and Travis Homer. No, in all seriousness, they got a little bit more help for Justin Fields in Robert Tonyan from the Green Bay Packers, who signed the deal. Decent tight end. Him and Cole Kmet could be a decent duo. I'm sure Rick is going to tab them for 20 touchdowns combined next season. I was in the Cole Kmet, joke hype a little bit too there, so I can't necessarily abstain myself. So, Robert Tonyan and Cole Kmet going to be the best tight end duo that we've seen in a while, clearly. But in all seriousness, aside from that, they got Nate Davis to help strengthen that offensive line that certainly needed it on basically damn near every position. It wouldn't surprise me if available at the 9th overall pick, the Bears also go for offensive linemen, because that team definitely needs the help on the O-line, to say the very least. But they get Nate Davis, taking him away from, I believe, the Tennessee Titans, if I'm not mistaken. So a team that had a lot of rushing success in this time there, obviously in part due to Derrick Henry, but in part due to that was a pretty decent run-blocking offensive line. They acquired DeMarcus Walker on the 3-year deal. They got TJ Edwards on a 3-year deal from the Philadelphia Eagles. But the big piece defensively for this team, a guy who could potentially become a stalwart on that defense for the next few years, a 4-year, $72 million contract, $50 million guaranteed is what it took to take away Tremaine Edmunds from the Buffalo Bills. Edmunds isn't even 25 years old yet. He came into this league super young. He's not even 25 yet per date of birth. He's not going to hit 30 by the time this contract is over. What a deal, to say the very least. Justin, obviously, this is kind of something we've seen the last few years. Team, not so good last year, has a young quarterback, has some money, and they spend it. The Jaguars did dang near the same thing with Trevor Lawrence in the Trevor Lawrence situation last year. So what did you make of the Bears signings for yourself?
I, for the most part, really liked all the moves that they've made, especially Tremaine Edmunds. I mean, that's an excellent signing. I love that for so many reasons, and not just the fact that I don't have to see him twice a year anymore. It's funny because for certain teams, there's always like a position that you associate. There's just some teams that always have players at a certain position, and the Bears always seem to have linebackers, like for years and years, and it doesn't matter how they get them. I think Tremaine Edmunds really is going to fit that Chicago style of play. He's exactly what they need. He's going to be a young leader in that defense. He's coming off a perennial playoff team for his whole career. He's really going to, I think that was an excellent signing for them. It's a really a statement signing. And if it works out there, they're going to look back at that Tremaine Edmunds signing and say, wow, that's really year one of when this stuff turned around.
Absolutely. I'm with you there. Tremaine Edmunds was quite the piece. We know that the Buffalo Bills, it was a interesting thing, and probably because price-wise, they didn't end up using the franchise tag on either of the main defensive players that they had between him and I believe it was Jordan Poyer, who was the safety that they re-signed recently. And it was probably clear why, that, they just felt that 1 year wasn't worth it. They tried to get a multi-year deal. And once free agency hits, guys can be taken away. And Tremaine Edmunds going for the big money deal. Absolutely great for him. $50 million guaranteed. Always love to see that. And yeah, I'm with you. For the Chicago Bears, like, this is one of those guys that they could really build this team around. I think what Ryan Poles is going to try to do, and we've seen this ironically within the same division for Chicago, is he's trying to now build the team. They ironically have the guy that they hope is the franchise quarterback. He's really trying to build this team around Justin Fields right now. And, for all that we've said about the offense last season, that Chicago Bears defense wasn't that much better. Now, there may have been a piece here and there, but that Chicago Bears defense didn't have world beaters, as, we saw them trading Roquan Smith away. So, and of course you could say, timeline reasons, they got assets back, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, simply put, like, that Chicago Bears defense now needs a new infusion of talent. And Tremaine Edmunds is definitely a great first piece into that for them. So I'm with you. I think it was a pretty good deal because, again, it's not as wide open in any way, but the NFC North, at least, I don't think the Bears are going to finish last in that division.
Pretty wide open.
Yeah. Now, we know for a fact, no in strong quotation marks, that one team in that division is losing their franchise quarterback. And I've been on record on the show saying that they're not going to be that good once they trade their franchise quarterback multiple times. So there's an opportunity for the Bears to really take a real step here. And I think this was a pretty good free agency for themselves. They're not necessarily done. They could still make one or two depth signings here. I would like, now this is me saying without seeing who's left on the open market, I would like maybe if they could go after one more skill position guy for Justin Fields, or even one more offensive lineman in this free agency before fully focusing on the draft, which I'm sure Ryan Poles and them are like working the draft board now, completely reworking it now that they're a number 9 overall, who's going to be available, who's going to be taken. Is there anyone that could by chance slide at that point? that's maybe worth taking a flyer on. Maybe a guy that actually was able to finish their pro day and didn't do stupid things when he was in college. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I'm not saying anything specifically or anyone. Come on now.
No names.
No names. But let's move on from that. We mentioned the Bears. Let's go to the Carolina Panthers, and we're going to kind of include a good chunk of the NFC South here as a whole because the NFC South was pretty active in this free agency period, Justin. But let's start with the Carolina Panthers, just because it began with them. They signed Andy Dalton to be that bridge quarterback, probably going to help mentor the rookie quarterback they're going to draft the number 1 overall, which I really like. I know this is not commonplace anymore, but the idea of a first round quarterback or just rookie quarterback in general sitting games, I think is a lost art. I don't want to romanticize and fantasize over it, but I feel like this could be a good thing to have Dalton there to at least be the stopgap for a bit. Or if the rookie just outplays him, and you have Dalton there to be the perfect veteran support. I think that was a pretty good deal there for the Carolina Panthers. You have Miles Sanders, who you mentioned earlier, 4 years, $25.4 million. They take him away from the Philadelphia Eagles. Hayden Hurst on a 3-year deal. They take him away from the Cincinnati Bengals, so 2 of the better teams last season. They get Justin McCray. Justin McCray signs a deal with them along with Bradley Bozeman staying with the team. And then defensively, they made a couple depth defensive line moves, but the big one was actually taking Von Bell away from the Cincinnati Bengals. I want to say it was a 4-year deal that they signed him to. So pretty decent, moves here. No big moves. Very similar to Chicago. No big moves, but small moves, building moves. I, relatively speaking, like it. So we move on from the Carolina Panthers here eventually. What do you think of the their free agency acquisition they made here?
It's funny. The Carolina Panthers were one of those teams where they struggled at times last year, but their holes and the depth that they were missing, they weren't things that were glaring to me. I mean, they had a pretty strong defense. Their run game was excellent at times. There were very few games where they were completely blown out in. A lot of the games were closer. They won a slobber knock. They lost a slobber knocker with the Ravens at one point. They were playing a lot of games where the issues were clear. It was their passing game, which could be the revolving door quarterback that they had last year. And occasionally they had situations where they just lost people in the secondary. So I think
Mike Evans,
won my fantasy championship. I thought I was gonna. That's a great. Did I ever tell you that? Kyler Murray goes down as a 2 quarterback league. Kyler Murray goes down, Tua goes down, and I think what was it? Whatever. I was losing players left and right. I think Derrick Henry was out that week too, and I'm like, all right, like I'm going against the highest scoring team in the finals, and I'm like, word, like I guess I'll get second place. And then if it wasn't for that Bills Cincy game getting canceled, I would have had the highest points by like 50 points in the entire season. It was great. Anyways, so I think that they don't have to be overly aggressive in free agency getting big name starters when they could sign depth. They have a young team. They're going to draft a quarterback this year. It's just going to be interesting to see which direction Frank Reich goes. And how they can improve that passing game, because that's really what the issue was last year.
Right, absolutely. And we'll see how that continues to go. Again, we kind of mentioned it, skill position is going to be the number 1 need here for the Carolina Panthers upcoming. Not really much of an opportunity to address that in this free agency, but again, there's still avenues open. Maybe they sign an underrated guy. Maybe they draft a guy. Very much possible considering what the free agents, what wide receivers have been like over these last couple of drafts. Or they make a trade for someone who could be on the block, and they still have a little bit of ammunition to play with. I feel they did get a lot of depth picks from 49ers, but we'll see what happens there. But speaking of being active, Justin, the Atlanta Falcons were active. This is a long list. So Desmond Ridder does not have a wide open space to the starting quarterback game because Taylor Heineke is coming, and he's coming in strong to challenge Desmond Ridder for that on a 2-year, $20 million deal to the Atlanta Falcons. They also traded for Jonnu Smith from the New England Patriots. To say the very least, that didn't necessarily work out in New England for Jonnu Smith. I think he'll be a pretty good number 2 tight end to Kyle Pitts, and I think he'll be a pretty good blocker and could be a receiver at times for whoever the quarterback ends up being. And they can run some twin tight end action, which I feel like Arthur Smith wants to be able to run in Atlanta. Like I just feel like that offense wants to be able to run the potential of a 2 tight end set, especially because their skill position group is still developing. And I think having a 2 tight end set would be nice to help support Drake London, to help a running game that Cordell Patterson is the number one running back there, basically, let's be honest. So I think that could be potentially be a solid value, not crazy stats, but a decent, scheme fit for Atlanta there. Offensive line, we talked about some teams in offensive line here. The Atlanta Falcons re-signing guys that they drafted and developed here. Caleb McGarry, 3 years, $34.5 million. Chris Lindstrom, 5 years, $105 million contract extension. Man, that's a great one. Chris Lindstrom had a hell of a year last year, making, I believe, his first Pro Bowl, first All-Pro team. Had a heck of a year, very much well-deserved payday. They've done an amazing job developing him, and he's done an amazing job since they drafted him a couple years back. So good there by Atlanta. They also had some defensive signings here. Lorenzo Carter, solid veteran. David Onyemata, taking him from the New Orleans Saints, so you steal him from a division rival. But the big one here, so this kind of crosses over the name portion of it. Jesse Bates to a 4-year, $64 million contract, $23 million in year one. What a signing. So similar ideals here, Justin. The Atlanta Falcons being active, having a lot of cap space, not necessarily having the franchise quarterback we feel, but roster building. I think, to me, the biggest thing was just the 2 extensions on the offensive line. But, of course, then you bring in a Jesse Bates there, taking him from the Cincinnati Bengals. What did you make of what are the Falcons doing here?
I don't know, to be completely honest. I mean, look, they're not making bad moves. A lot of these teams are looking at the Jacksonville Jaguars of last year, where everyone was like, what are they doing? Why are they overpaying for all these guys? And then all of a sudden we're relevant in the playoffs. So, I mean, they're not making bad moves. They still have a young quarterback. Desmond Ridder did play well towards the end of the season when he finally got into games. But that being said, I don't know. I don't know what specifically they're doing because they don't have that quarterback yet for sure. Like, we don't know what Desmond Ridder really is going to be. They do have some depth in their skill position players. Jonnu Smith will help them there. They'll do well with him, but I don't know. I feel like there's other pressing matters that they needed to address. Maybe I don't know that team as well and their depth and whatnot, but I just feel like there's other moves that I would have been concerned about first.
I agree. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars, along with the Christian Kirk contract breaking things, are going to give teams the necessary and ideal thought process of, hey, if the division's wide open, let's go for it. Because, I mean, I know it ended up this way, and I know kind of in preseason we were talking about it being Colts-Titans, but the Jaguars ended up taking advantage of what was a wide open and bad division. So I feel like the Falcons are trying to do the same thing here because, look, I know other teams have made moves in this division. The Saints got a quarterback and the Carolina Panthers trade up for the first overall pick to get a quarterback. But there is no definitive favorite in this division. There's just not, to me.
No.
And I feel that, I get the idea of wanting to take, the opportunity. Will that work out? Maybe. Who knows? I mean, it worked for the Jaguars, but I mean, lightning can only strike so many times. But I do still get at least the roster building aspect of it. I do like that from what the Atlanta Falcons are doing here in regards. I think Jesse Bates was a pretty good signing in that secondary. That secondary needed some guys there, so them adding him again. The offensive line has their guys now in case they do end up getting a future franchise quarterback down the line, or if one of these guys becomes it. Just wait. The Atlanta Falcons are about to go farther in Rick's bracket of teams to become a fan of than I think we expected beforehand. But it is a decent job here for the Atlanta Falcons. Again, in a division that's wide open, in a division that everyone is making moves. Let's close this out with the other 2 teams in this division. Really a lot of minor moves. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers had to cut and restructure a lot of guys. They had some cap issues going into this one, to say the very least. And a similar deal when it came to the New Orleans Saints. Both teams making some moves here with restructuring, and both teams signing a lot of depth players on both sides, to say the very least. I will say New Orleans Saints, great value signing with Jamal Williams. I don't understand why the Detroit Lions let him go. He was phenomenal last year, and now the Saints get him to hopefully pair with Alvin Kamara, hopefully. But, in theory, that's in theory. But the 2 biggest names for both teams, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers got Baker Mayfield, Justin. 1-year deal worth up to $8.5 million, $4 million in guaranteed money. And the New Orleans Saints, they signed this guy. I don't know if you ever heard of him, Justin. Derek Carr, $60 million fully guaranteed at signing, another $10 million guaranteed in year 3, vesting option in year 1, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It also features a no trade clause and has $100 million in total guarantees for his 4-year, $150 million contract. The Saints win the Derek Carr sweepstakes. It's kind of obvious. He met with them so many times. It was fun to think of like another situation that he could have gone to, like the Colts or the Panthers. But in reality, he spoke to that organization literally from when he was still a Raider in the trade discussion, and then like twice in free agency before he signed there. It would have been an upset to say the very least. So
yeah, it would have been something.
Yeah. So your thought on these two teams getting quarterbacks for this next season, and for the Saints, we assume for multiple years down the line, you hope. The Saints getting Derek Carr and the Buccaneers getting Baker Mayfield, the boy.
Well, it's hard to say that Baker Mayfield's going to be the long-term answer. I mean, he's already been on 2 teams in his young career. This is his 3rd team. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes long-term with the Bucs. I like the Saints move because the revolving door at quarterback last year was not great. Between Taysom Hill, Andy Dalton, and Jameis Winston, they weren't having a ton of success, obviously, passing the ball down the field, and especially when you have really, really good young receivers. I mean, Chris Olave played lights out last year. If he could have stayed healthy, there's a chance he was challenging Garrett Wilson for that offensive rookie of the year. And they've re-signed Michael Thomas. Kamara could have a good year, assuming he plays. Jamal Williams is an excellent, excellent addition, especially as a goal line back, which is a place where they struggled last year. This team could be the team that challenges for the division this year, especially in a weaker division. You're going to play at least one rookie quarterback, at least one quarterback that has less than a full season's worth of starts. I mean, and Baker Mayfield, who's on a team that struggled last year with Tom Brady. So who knows? This division is wide open. The Saints seem like the most complete team as of right now in that division. We'll see how it shapes up.
A team that also has lost a lot since the start of the offseason, not even including Brady. Again, they had to restructure guys. They had to let guys go. I believe they cut Donovan Smith.
A ton of stuff that they had to fix with the cap.
Yeah, it was bad. That's the price they paid for acquiescing, bringing back all 22 starters from that Super Bowl 2 years ago. And then last year, the cap, gymnastics, you could say, that they had to go through in order to get a decent team around Brady, which, was barely enough to win that division. Like I said, Donovan Smith, I believe they cut Shaq Mason, who they traded, funny enough, to the Houston Texans for another late round pick. Shaq Mason's lot in life is just going to be being traded to random teams at this point for like 5th, 6th, or 7th round picks. But yeah, no, it's going to be interesting to say, or at least I think Tampa, if they somehow don't finish last in this division, like, again, it's so wide open, anyone could conceivably finish last, but just from the talent exodus that they've had to now the quarterback play, what is it going to be like with Baker? And I think the only other quarterback, correct me if I'm wrong, is still Kyle Trask on that team. If I had to give an early prediction, I'm thinking Tampa might be the 4th team in this division right now. It's not looking too hot for them boys in what was formerly Tampa Bay. Yeah, and
there's not too much to say to it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that it's going to be a very different team. There's rumors that they're trading Chris Godwin. They cut Fournette. The quarterback's going to be different.
Yeah.
There's going to be growing pains in Tampa Bay now.
Mike Evans is going to go back to the dark days in Tampa, eh? It was such a good 3 years for him.
His dark days, though, were still, I mean, they're going to lose, but he was still catching, balls for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns every year. So we'll see.
True, but I think he enjoyed the last 3 years where he got to win a Super Bowl. And
I can't imagine why.
I don't know. Just a thought. Just a thought. Last thoughts on this division before we move on. Derek Carr. I feel like we're going to talk way more in depth about it come the actual division previews we do, because spoiler alert, ladies and gentlemen, we will bring back the division previews much later on in the summer like we did last year. But I personally think that Derek Carr is all right. He's a good quarterback. But there's a reason why I still think this division is wide open. He doesn't make the Saints the bona fide winner to me. Now, if come July, August, when this roster is way more solidified and we see a lot more of a, plan here, we'll see. But Derek Carr, to me, he doesn't move the needle as much as you think. Is he the best quarterback in this division right now? There ain't much competition. There's just not. This guy's coming off a year where he was in the same division as Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Russell Wilson. I know the third of those guys is not that great, but the first two are. And like he was the third or fourth best quarterback in that division last year. I'll give him third because Russ was just terrible last year. But at the same time, now he's going to a division where he's the definitive number one guy, but he's got Dennis Allen as a coach. And I wasn't a fan of Dennis Allen going into last year. I think it was kind of proven right. And so now this year, we'll see. This is a year for both these guys. Can Derek Carr prove that the Raiders shouldn't have been as mean to him as they were? Which, to be fair, they probably should have given him a little bit more love. But can Dennis Allen prove that he could be a pretty good head coach in terms of a play caller? We'll see. Because my whole sticking point last year was I felt Sean Payton did a lot of things for that offense that Dennis Allen just couldn't replicate. And lo and behold. So we'll see if Derek Carr can make up for that in any way. But again, the Saints, still to me, no reason why they should be considered the bona fide, like far and away favorite in this division. I still don't see it personally. Out of them.
The Saints were an interesting case last year because one, they're still a young team. I mean, they have some older role players and some veteran leaders, but for the most part, they're a pretty young team, especially offensively. And they really started off the season very poorly. I mean, with the new head coach and new everything, they started the season 1-6 and then 2-8. They finished 7-10. So they did go on a win streak towards the end when they started to change up the quarterback. I think Taysom Hill was playing a lot more. Olave really started to come on. It's going to be interesting to see how Derek Carr affects them offensively. Because if he comes in and he struggles like he did in Vegas last year, then yeah, obviously they're not going to be very good. But if he can come in and show some level of consistency after a full offseason, a system that he enjoys, good skill position players, and a great running game, and they can run that offense in a way that benefits both Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints, then it makes sense why they would be the favorite. I mean, they have the best skill position players. They have the best run game. And they're just the most balanced team in that division right now. So that would, to me, mean they have the highest ceiling, and they also have the most established quarterback. That's where Vegas is going to go. That's where the odds are going to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, someone has to be the projected winner going into the season.
I guess.
Even if we don't like them. Saints slander all the way. The Saints are going to join that list of teams for me very soon. Anyways. We're about done with the NFC for the most part. We do have one more team here that was relatively active. I think probably the most active in their division here compared to the other compatriots. The New York Football Giants. Just really quick running down this list. So in the franchise tag period, they ended up being able to felt like the midnight hour, re-signing Daniel Jones and agreeing to a deal with him, which was a deal to say the very least at 4 years, $160 million. They then franchise tagged Saquon Barkley. They got decent skill position players in Matt Breida and Paris Campbell, Sterling Shepard returning to the team, Darius Slayton returning to the team, trading for a decent player. His name's Darren Waller. Not sure if you heard of him. For ironically the 100th overall pick in the draft, a third-round pick. A couple decent acquisitions on the defensive side, more depth players, but they did get Bobby Okereke from the Indianapolis Colts on a 4-year, $40 million deal, $22 million guaranteed. So decent moves for the Giants. Justin, I felt like the Giants were a team that we talked about here, after they got eliminated from the playoffs, that they needed to upgrade this roster because I think as magical as year one was, as great as year one was under Brian Daboll, teams are going to figure things out in year two. They're going to understand what the Giants are scheming more now that they have a full year on tape from Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley being healthy. They're going to I don't want to say no what he's going to do because obviously guys, evolve their playbooks, but they're still their go-to plays and schemes and stuff. And I feel that teams are going to look at trying to pressure Daniel Jones more. And this was a much needed thing of keeping Saquon. Now they just franchise tagged him. I don't know if that necessarily means that I doubt they extend him, but they at least kept Saquon. They got Matt Breida there, who's a pretty good player. And they were able to keep some of the skill position players there to keep that consistency, plus get a Darren Waller, who, yes, he's been hurt the last couple of years, but the last time he wasn't hurt, over 1,000 yards as a tight end, basically. So I feel what this basically was that they committed themselves to Daniel Jones and they had to build from there. What were your thoughts about the Giants? Because I'm saying them because the other teams in the NFC East, like the Commanders, they got some names, but nothing crazy. They did get Jacoby Brissett. The Dallas Cowboys, funny enough, we mentioned them at the top program. Let's just say they traded for Brandon Cooks from the Houston Texans, which much needed there. They needed an extra receiver in that room last year. I think it'll be a pretty good fit next to the guys they have there in CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup.
And they traded for Gilmore while we were off.
And Gilly Lock, yep. So they add to the defense as getting a guy who could be next to Trevon Diggs. And getting a receiver now that could be next to the guys. Good depth moves. But the Giants were easily the most active because they were the ones that handed out the big extension to their quarterback this time. Not the last team that needs to hand out an extension to their quarterback, but the first to do so in the NFC East. They give that extension, then they got to build from there. What did you make of all the moves from the Giants?
I like them. I think that there's still a few pieces away. There's a lot of things that they're going to have to address, including receiver. Unfortunately, like I said, it's not a strong receiver free agency class. So there wasn't really a move they were going to make there. But yeah, I expect Joe Shane to continue to be very active in free agency and in the NFL draft. I wouldn't be surprised if you see a trade here or there. And I think they made the right moves. I mean, they addressed needs. They locked up the quarterback that brought them to the playoffs last year, and they franchised Saquon because that was the only way he was coming back. They needed to keep him. Without him, it's funny to me. Without the other, it didn't really make sense to sign. It didn't make sense to sign like Daniel Jones without Saquon and vice versa.
Right. It didn't. You had to bring both back basically. Whichever way you were going to figure it out.
You caught lightning in a bottle last year, as Rick would say. And it seems that without the other, neither one would have been successful or as successful. Daniel Jones benefited from having Saquon draw all those defenders. It allowed him to run the ball. It allowed him to find open guys, extend plays, all that stuff. And Saquon benefited from Daniel Jones having the best season of his career because it opened up some of those running lanes that weren't there in the past seasons when teams were stacking the box because they didn't trust the Giants to throw. Now they just need receivers that'll catch the ball. I mean, 10 drops in the divisional round is not a great way to end your season. So they're going to have to go out there. I expect them to draft at least one receiver, if not maybe two, and or trade for someone because I know there are guys out there. Again, DeAndre Hopkins is a name that's been linked to the Giants. Let's see if they make a move on that one.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely need an extra pass catcher there in the Big Apple because you pay Daniel Jones now. You got to help him. One thing I will say about all the transactions from them, can confirm Josh McDaniels does not love because they traded Darren Waller a couple days after he got married.
A great move too. After he announced it and it was supposed to be a secret.
Oh my God, what a time. So happy marriage, Darren Waller. Sad that you had to be traded right after it, but at least you're going to the Giants and you get away from Josh McDaniels. Solace. It's New York. It's not bad. I'm sure he loved Vegas. His wife plays in Vegas, so you live with what you got to deal with. Kelsey Plum, future New York Liberty, maybe. No, I don't know. This is not a WNBA show, to say the very least. I just threw that out there just for fun. Speaking of which, let's now move on. I mentioned Josh McDaniels and the Las Vegas Raiders. That division saw a little bit of activity there. We'll get to. I mean, the Raiders were active, but really, there's one main guy to talk about. But we can mention that a little bit later on. Let's talk about the team that was easily the most active in free agency, the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos getting Sean Payton. Before we took our little hiatus. The message was clear. There needs to be a concerted effort to surround the franchise quarterback of this team. Jarrett Stidham needs as much support as he can in Denver, so they clearly need to surround him with the best talent possible. Yes, I know it's Russell Wilson, ladies and gentlemen. Let me live.
Excuse me.
So let's what the Broncos did. Well, they spent a good chunk of change. On a running back perspective, because Javonte Williams got injured relatively, midway through the season or so, probably not going to be ready for the start next year, and who knows what his health status is going to be. They got Samaje Perine from the Cincinnati Bengals. Pretty good signing there. I think Perine, this is a big opportunity for him and a big time, big chance for him to prove himself in the NFL. And he had some really good moments with the Bengals. I'm not shocked, because we were kind of expecting, what were the Bengals going to do with Joe Mixon? And it could have been a case where they could have let Joe Mixon go and get Perine, but maybe it was just thinking they obviously choose to keep Joe Mixon and his ways. And now you have Samaje Perine going to a different team. I think he could definitely be a support piece for the Denver Broncos. But the big thing with this team was the offensive line. Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey, two guys leaving their previous teams. Ben Powers, now former Baltimore Raven, 4-year, $52 million contract, $28.5 million guaranteed. Mike McGlinchey, $87.5 million for the now former San Francisco 49ers right tackle, over $50 million in guaranteed money. Not the only team in the NFC West that the Broncos poached from. They got Zach Allen from the Arizona Cardinals on a 3-year deal worth just under $46 million and just a little over $32 million guaranteed. A couple of depth signings here and there. Alex Singleton, I think, could be a decent acquisition for the linebacking core. Chris Manhertz is on the tight end side of things. Michael Burton, always love to see a fullback sign. And like I said, franchise quarterback Jarrett Stidham sadly has to sit behind Russell Wilson, who they paid last season. So while we wait for the Jarrett Stidham show, we have to see what Russell Wilson can actually do in Denver. So in all seriousness, Justin, they beefed up that offensive line that definitely needed it last year. You know, it wasn't a perfect line to the very least. Neither was the coach, and now they've improved both. What does this do for Denver? Can they avoid being the disappointment they were last year, in part because of these moves?
Absolutely. Their offensive line was very injured last year, and they did lose Javonte Williams very early in the season. So that was a major point of contention for their season. And it definitely hurt Russell Wilson. I mean, when was the last time we saw Russell Wilson play any football without a running game? They didn't have it last year. So having that run game established will help. Sean Payton's play calling will help. Their defense was once again nasty last year, but they were among the lowest scoring teams in the league, and they're going to need to start putting up points. Russ has the deep ball. You saw it. It's still there. You saw it last year. It's just you didn't really see anything else. So we'll get some play calling down. Sean Payton will tame the bucking Bronco, and I expect that team to be much better this year. I'm not saying that they're going to do anything, extraordinary, but I certainly expect to see a major step forward.
Yeah, I think it's a fair assumption to assume a team upgrading from Nathaniel Hackett to Sean Payton should probably be a little bit better. Yeah, to say the very least. Mm-hmm. I'm with you. I really like those offensive line signings. I think Mike McGlinchey has been very good ever since San Fran drafted him. Big loss for them. That's now back-to-back seasons. The San Francisco's losing a key starter to the offensive line, Alex Mack before last season, and Mike McGlinchey this year. We'll see how they're able to recover from that. But yeah, I think McGlinchey and Powers are two great ones, especially for the running game, because Ben Powers is obviously used to blocking for a rushing attack. So now you have that against Samaje Perine, and hopefully if Javonte Williams is able to play at some point, maybe the middle of next season, and he could come back from his injury and come back as strong as possible. Those are both good. And maybe, and this is the thing, if Sean Payton could scheme Russell Wilson to use his legs a tad bit more than what he had to last year, I mean more so in terms of the scheming and the play calling and it being deliberate, other than Russell Wilson trying to run for his life, which is what the Nathaniel Hackett game plan was. Bold move, but yeah, I think the Broncos did a pretty good job in free agency. I think this is about it in terms of free agency. Maybe there's one more piece or two that they add here, but I think now the focus is trying to make the best of their depth draft picks that they have, because they have to do so. They're going to need to be as efficient with these draft picks as possible for themselves, to say the very least. So we'll see if Denver can have a strong, relatively speaking, draft compared to teams in the past without a first-round pick. So there's that for you. Yeah, like I said, there was another team in this division that was active or so, but really we're going to save them for the players portion. Looking across the rest of the AFC landscape here, let's head south, Justin, to a team that has been very active. We mentioned that they traded Cooks to the Cowboys a little bit ago. A lot, and I mean a lot, of guys signing with the Houston Texans. Not all of them household names, so I'm not going to list all of them. That's a lie. I'm going to. No, in all seriousness. Obviously, the Houston Texans with the number 2 overall pick, they're going to draft their next lamb set for the slaughterhouse, because good God, that offensive line is bad. But before they set that lamb to the slaughterhouse, there might be a bridge quarterback there, to say at the very least. Case Keenum with the Houston Texans. Has he played with Houston before? He has, right? With the Texans?
I don't remember.
Fair enough.
He's been on so many teams.
Fair point. So if he has been a Texan before, ladies and gentlemen, the prodigal son has returned to the Houston Texans. The only thing that could have made it funnier quarterback-wise is somehow Matt Schaub came out of retirement and played for the Texans. But, at that point, you might as well bring back Arian Foster and Andre Johnson. Maybe they would script the Texans to win a few more games next year.
The script joke.
You know what's coming, dude. They signed a couple, decent pieces. Noah Brown, Mike Boone. Robert Woods, I really like that for them. Just a veteran wide receiver as a guy there for that young locker room. This is a very young locker room, and I think what the Houston Texans tried to do was just add veterans who could just be, professionals there. Show them what it's like, especially with a new first-time head coach. I feel like, they're going to need to rely on what veterans they have and guys who are able to, set an example here. So you have a guy in the skill position group you get in Robert Woods on a 2-year deal. You get Shaq Mason, who you traded for from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a veteran to the offensive line. I think him and Laramie Tunsil are basically the only two Houston Texans I can name on that goddamn offensive line. They also got Scott Quisenberry at center, so he's probably going to end up continuing to start for the team. Chase Winovich from the New England Patriots, funny enough, Sheldon Rankins signs with this team. So those are two guys that have been around for a couple years. Hassan Ridgeway, and that's the most of it. Jimmy Ward and MJ Stewart in the safety group, which I found weird because I think safety-wise they had, I think, Jalen Petrie last season, who had a pretty good rookie season. Yeah. But maybe one of these guys is just going to be his backup more so. And again, that veteran leadership for this team. Just a lot of veteran moves here, filling out the roster for Houston. I feel like, Justin, it's kind of similar to what we talked about last year. A lot of this team is guys just trying to prove themselves to the NFL that they can still play. But this is a team filling out its roster to be able to just field the team with some of these moves.
Yeah, look, there were bits and pieces that were bright last year. I mean, Stingley had a good year. Jalen Petrie was good. They have a good young running back in Damon Pierce. But they need more, obviously. They need a lot of help. They had a lot of cap space, and you expected them to make a lot of signings. They're also going to have a lot of draft capital this year. I believe they got 2 first-round picks. And look, I expect it to be a very different team this year. You expect them to take a quarterback with the 2nd overall pick. They're going to take another player with the Browns pick later in that draft. And they're going to be a very young team for a while. It'll be interesting to see if there is another coaching change after this year. But,
they can't do that again. What would it be, 5 years in a row?
I'm rooting for it. It screwed me out of that tie last year.
I was going to say, you're still against the Houston Texans for what happened.
They had the tie.
Lovie Smith said, not today.
I was so close.
Are you going to get a shirt that says F the Texans or something like that?
No.
Oh, okay.
I just feel bad for those players.
I was going to say, we need more shirt and jersey humor now that we have Rick wearing a Cole Strange jersey. Which, by the way, we're going to make him wear for the mock draft. Whenever he watches this episode back and he discovers this, he's wearing that Cole Strange jersey for the mock draft going forward. We need like specified times where we make him wear that jersey because, like, let's be real here, that costs money. It would be really stupid to not use it more often. So we got it.
It's not about the money. It's that we need the world to know that he came in last place in this Agents of Chaos
inaugural challenge.
It's going to be interesting to see who the next jersey is going to be.
Oh my God!
I'm not a Patriots guy because I don't want to buy a Patriots.
I don't know where. I feel like for us, we need to we got a lot of pre-draft work, ladies and gentlemen, but not the pre-draft work that you think. We have to do the bracket to decide Rick's next team, and I think what we're going to do, because we're going to start this the draft prospect, looking soon. We need to find one guy that's going to stick on a team first and foremost. So preferably 2nd and 4th round. We got to find one guy that we just love, whatever it is, the story, the character, etc.
The name.
Or the name. The name is key. And we are going to select him, and whoever comes in last next season, they're going to get that guy. They have to. I think that's how we have to do it going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, how much longer will this podcast last? We hope for years and years, but let's assume that we're at least going to go with more seasonally.
I got no problem doing it, and there could be no one watching. I love watching. I love talking about football. So
absolutely, this is kind of more for us. If you guys just watch, thank you. All right, moving on from the self-indulgence. Well, actually, we're not really moving on because we're going to talk about the AFC East here a little bit. Some teams in the AFC East making some moves here. The Miami Dolphins re-signing their trio of running backs here. Myles Gaskin, Raheem Mostert, and Jeff Wilson. Also taking 2 New York Jets from last season. They get Braxton Berrios and Mike White from them. Aaron Rodgers looked at that roster and said, not good enough for me, brother. I can't have Mike White on the roster trying to take my snaps away because, death taxes and Aaron Rodgers fears Mike White. So they got Mike White to be the backup quarterback. Probably Rick. They also got Braxton Berrios, who the Jets ended up cutting a couple other guys here and there. But the big thing was trading for Jalen Ramsey. All they had to do was trade Hunter Long, a tight end, and a third round. Excuse me, I almost said third
overall pick is a little different.
Yeah, that would have been crazy. And it'd been like, how did you get that? But a third round pick and Hunter Long to the Los Angeles Rams in exchange for Jalen Ramsey. We didn't really talk about them. The Los Angeles Rams completely going a lot of roster turnover. They cut Bobby Wagner. I think that happened just before the.
They cut him. I heard that they were looking to trade him, but I wasn't sure if he got cut.
I'm pretty sure they cut him. I want to say they cut him. So Bobby Wagner on the outs. Jalen Ramsey now officially traded. A lot of roster decisions being made, and guys also having to restructure contracts. I think their left tackle from last year. Why am I forgetting his name? Doesn't matter. But they had to restructure guys on the offensive line. I'm pretty sure Stafford's contract was probably restructured. If it wasn't, what are you doing, Los Angeles? But in short, the Rams are basically going through it after winning that Super Bowl now 2 seasons ago, which was it worth it? I mean, they still won the Super Bowl. The jewelry is always nice at the end of it. It's just,
maybe.
The part after it is just the not fun part. But, positives and negatives, boys. Positives and negatives. But real quick on the Miami Dolphins getting Jalen Ramsey here. They will cut Byron Jones. I'm pretty sure it's official at this point. Or at least he's a designated post-June first cut, but he's basically not on the team anymore. It's going to be Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard. Justin, this, some people have been trying to equate this to, Jalen Waddle. They had him last year. They get a Tyreek Hill. And the offense just goes like those two guys were beasts in the regular season last year. Now I think the idea is that Xavier Howard already has proven himself to be a very good corner on this team, has had good seasons. Now you get another good corner next to him. And so it's going to be tough to throw against this team. What do you think? Because some people have been talking about Jalen Ramsey that he wasn't the same last year. He was not the same last year. I think we could agree with that. But I think he's still a pretty good cornerback, to say the very least. Do you think maybe not sort of the hype that people are trying to put, but do you think the two of them help each other? Like now Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey are able to help each other in terms of you have to think twice about throwing. And now not every single game the number one assignment is going to go to necessarily Jalen Ramsey. Now sometimes it's going to go to Xavier Howard, maybe depending on scheming against the opponent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it allows you to get after the quarterback, really. You're going to see their pass rush really benefit from this kind of thing, because this kind of move, because you're not going to need to drop as many guys into coverage. That being said, I mean, it's not like you're getting Jalen Ramsey from 6 years ago. He's still a very good player, but he's not necessarily, I don't think, the lockdown corner that he once was. But that being said, he's still absolutely a starter in this league. He'll play well. It'll certainly make teams think twice about throwing into that secondary. I can see them with a lot more turnovers this year, which is something that they struggled with last year. And yeah, I expect them to get after the quarterback more, because that's also an area where they had a rough time last year on defense. They brought back a lot of the same guys that were on their top defense when Brian Flores was the coach. But because of the difference in coaching philosophy, their defense didn't, let's say they didn't thrive last year.
Well, they have a new DC. They have a old man Vic Fangio there.
Yeah, and I think Vic Fangio is a great coach. So I think you'll see an improvement on that defensive side. And the AFC East is shaping up to be a monster division this year, and I don't like it.
To say the very least, the AFC East is looking to try to be very competitive this year. And the way you do that, well, did the Patriots do that? I mean, they still have McCorkle Jones there. I mean, they did cut Brian Hoyer, so it's officially Bailey Zappi hour in Rick's time. You think the Patriots advance in the bracket that we do eventually because, just off of Bailey Zappi, or no, too much pain?
I always questioned Rick's fandom. I never really truly believed in his Jet fanness, his Jets loyalty. I mean, you saw him. He bought that Cole Strange jersey real quick.
So what you're saying is Rick is a Judas then?
Yeah. So, I mean, he was always very into Jets history. He knows a lot. His brain is with knowledge of sports. It's unbeatable. But as far as loyalty goes,
oh no,
would you really be surprised if he did become a Patriots? I mean, have you ever seen him wear a Jets jersey on this show?
No.
49 episodes, Jerg. I've seen him wear a Patriots jersey.
Yep. We've seen him wear a Commander's hat. That may have more so been Sandoval, but still, same thing.
No, he wore it.
Yeah, he
wore it.
Yeah, both of them.
Yeah, he's spoken more highly of
he's probably going to get a Lions jersey
than he has ever of the Jets.
He might get a Lions jersey next before he gets another Jets jersey.
He's not going to get it. Why would he get a Jets jersey?
Yeah.
Although to be fair, if maybe the Sports Agents of Chaos pick challenge will make him get like a Aaron Rodgers jersey,
Oh my
an Aaron
god.
Rodgers Jets jersey.
Oh, we just make the jersey for
It
each of
might
us.
maybe we'll
See
make it different
what
for each person. You'll get a Tannehill Titans jersey.
I was about to say. That's what you little. So we'll make you get a Texans jersey that has Lovie Smith's name on it. I like that.
All right, that's fair.
All right, we'll finalize those details when the challenge comes forth. But yeah, oh my god, we're just pure evil on this show. We're pure chaos. Anyways, chaotic evil to say the very least. Yeah, no, that actually kind of matches up with the show. Anyways, continuing with discussion, I agree with what you're saying. I think Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard will be able to just help change.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about.
Yeah. Look, man, this show is going to go off on tangents. Doesn't matter what the topic is. But yeah, it's going to help Vic Fangio coming in, and also like that defensive pass rush. Like they got Bradley Chubb last year. They need to make it happen. They paid him very good money. They paid that man his money, Justin, and they're going to have to make it work out well. So, it was pretty good signings. Well, a team that has made signings, but would you qualify them as good? The New England Patriots. So they signed James Robinson. Everyone's just taking your guys here, bro. They signed James Robinson. They signed Mike Gesicki, who I forgot even hit free agency on a 1-year deal. Juju Smith-Schuster playing for the Patriots now. Did some offensive line signings. Riley Reif is like the biggest name there. And then defensively, Jonathan Jones, they re-signed him to a 2-year deal, as well as Jabril Peppers. And also, funny enough, Raekwon McMillan signs with the team. The reason why I bring that up, former Alabama player. Just saying, it's about who you know. Nah, in all seriousness, Raekwon McMillan, like, he's probably going to be on a team. Just it's funny he ends up with the Patriots. Any comments about the Patriots here, Justin? Or is it just like,
I hope they're bad.
Fair enough.
Yeah, no, they will still have a good defense next year. They still will get after the quarterback. They'll still probably make games close. It's whether or not they can get that offense going. They struggled last year. Juju is an okay signing, but I don't necessarily think he answers their questions.
Right.
They lost the tight end, and we'll see. I mean, I don't know if James Robinson is necessarily the answer there either. Unless he's going to be the third back there. It was a weird signing for them.
Yeah, to say the very least. But I mean, we'll see. We'll figure it out. Bill Belichick, they kind of surprised us last year of how good they were, quote unquote. So we'll see. I mean, are they going to be randomly competitive again this year? Probably. That's just how the Patriots are. They won't go away. We're going to talk about the Jets here momentarily. I just want to bring up the Buffalo Bills. They signed Matt Milano to a 2-year extension. They re-signed Jordan Poyer, like I said, to a 2-year deal. But the biggest thing here for me personally, I think the Buffalo Bills are trying a challenge here. They want to try to get as many players with the name Allen in there, whether it's first or last name as possible. Kyle Allen is the backup quarterback for this team. So now it's a challenge. They need to trade for Allen Robinson from the Rams because he's up for trade. They need to try to trade for Josh Allen from the Jacksonville Jaguars, trade 3 first-round picks if you have to. Get all the Allens possible in this league. Get all of them just on one team and say, we're pushing it. Allen is the face of the franchise, but you don't know which one they're talking about. That's my challenge for the Buffalo Bills. If they don't do that, I'm not going to pick them to win the AFC next year. All right, moving on to actual analysis, sort of. The New York Jets. The New York Jets here. Speaking of missed potential, Alan Lazard is a New York Jet and not a Buffalo Bill. Already losing faith in you, Buffalo. But in all seriousness, sort of the New York Jets have made a few moves. I have a Jets fan with me here, so we kind of have to bring it up. And I mean, to be fair, come the bracket, Justin, like, because we're all voting on it. Well, you and me could just, vote against him the whole time and make sure the Jets make it to at least like the final 4 of that bracket.
I don't want him to be a Jets fan anymore.
Oh man,
I need loyalty.
Fair enough.
To believe. I don't want a fair weather fan.
But Justin, here's the thing: wouldn't it just be a kick to just like make Rick have to go through it again?
No, because they're going to be good this year. They've made good signings. They
also, don't want him to
quarterback. I'm not saying they're going to win a Super Bowl. Right. You don't know how he's going to work out, but they were a top 5 defense last year, and they were a quarterback away from being a much better football team.
Very true. And they may have gotten that quarterback.
Well, we'll see.
I'll say this. We're not going to talk about it because it's not official. And also I think it'll just be better with Rick being here. So we will take away from that. But let's just run under the assumption that it's probably going to happen and then just look at the moves that they've made since. So a couple depth defensive acquisitions here. They get Solomon Thomas on a 1-year deal. Quincy Williams re-signed on a 3-year deal. Chuck Clark in a trade from the Baltimore Ravens. That Adam Schefter. I got to give him credit. He really trolled Jets fans with that one. Greg Zuerlein re-signing with the team. Thomas Morstead signing with the Jets. But the main one being Allen Robinson is signed with you guys 4 years, $44 million. First off, Green Bay, really? $11 million a year? You weren't going to pay that? But in all seriousness, Jets make a couple moves here.
Back there.
I know. But well, let's look at this, Justin. So you just said it. You guys needed more than anything a quarterback last season, and we have to wait on that officially. But you make a couple depth signings here. Any of these signings, maybe more so Allen Lazard, because you look at the wide receiver room last year. Garrett Wilson, very good rookie season. Corey Davis, is he? Well, I give the floor to you, Justin. Before we talk about like the biggest names who have signed separately from teams, give us like your thoughts on the Jets right now, assuming they get their quarterback, which they should. What is this team set up to do right now?
I'd like to hear more about the health of Breece Hall. I think is a major point for them, and they are likely to make some moves on the offensive line. I do expect Mekhi Becton to be healthy. I expect Font to be healthy. Vera Tucker to be healthy, so that will help. But the sky should be the limit for this team. I mean, assuming the defense comes back and plays the way they did, they're still going to have the same linebacking core. Quinnen Williams is eligible for an extension in a contract year. I expect him to come out swinging. I don't know if Carl Lawson will be on the team. They say maybe he would be involved in the trade as sort of a cap dump, but he's been excellent for them. They're going to get Jermaine Johnson on the field, and that secondary is going to be even better. I love the Chuck Clark trade. It was an excellent trade for them. It's going to be a really strong push, I think, for the Jets. Their offense should do well. I expect maybe Corey Davis will probably be included in the Aaron Rodgers trade as well, because they could use receivers in Green Bay, and it would be another good way to dump some salary for the Jets.
Also, Davis and Lazard are kind of like similar archetypes to an extent, so it'd be kind of redundant to have both. No,
I mean, yeah. Well, it's not that I wouldn't take both. I mean, if you have good tall receivers that are good at running routes, I'm not going to say I don't need more than one. But if you're going to get rid of a receiver and you have to choose between Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, and Garrett Wilson, you're probably going to take the 28-year-old who's on the end of his second contract and a free agent next year, who's also making the most money.
Yeah, makes sense. I was going to say, what do you think?
It's almost not even a talent thing. I mean, it is, but it is.
Right. I was going to say, when it comes to the Jets, like a big thing was like with Elijah Moore, haven't found a way to be able to use him consistently enough. Do you guys still have Denzel Mims, or did you let him go?
Denzel Mims is still there as well.
So do you think there's a way / chance that maybe now those two in particular, because those have been two guys who like frustrations have been made clear, like they just...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what are you going to ask? Are those guys that get more involved?
Yeah, basically.
Absolutely. I mean, I think part of the issue was play calling, and I want to sit here and blame LaFleur, but at the same time, I've always said you have to call plays that benefit the players that you have and show off the skills that those players have. And after watching the quarterbacks that they had under center last year, I'm not sure that his play calling was the issue. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was pulling my hair out on every third down screen pass. I was especially late in the game. But if you don't have the players that you trust to move the ball down the field, and this is what you think your best option is, I guess, those are the plays you're going to call. So if you get a guy like Aaron Rodgers, and obviously there's going to be a new play caller in Hackett / Aaron Rodgers, there's going to be a more wide open playbook. And I think you'll see the younger players benefit from it. I mean, the best quarterbacks, they spread the ball. Everyone gets a touch. So if you have 3 really good young receivers who haven't really been involved, all of a sudden now maybe the production for your top guys is a little less, but you're going to hit guys. I mean, I like Braxton Berrios. It didn't make any sense to have all the play calls that they had for Braxton Berrios. You have Elijah Moore. You drafted Elijah Moore. You're paying Elijah Moore. He's a faster, more skilled player than Braxton Berrios. Nothing against Berrios. Like I said, I love Berrios. He was excellent. But why are you running these plays for Braxton Berrios and not Elijah Moore? Now all of a sudden you're going to have a guy that can distribute the ball more. You're not looking to cushion him. You're not looking to, you know, baby him, so to speak. And yeah, I expect these guys to really get involved. And if they aren't getting involved, I expect to see a ton of them in the preseason because then they'll be trade bait.
Yep. Makes sense. Makes sense. All right. Last two parts of this show in terms of us talking about free agency. Big name signed. So we're just going to run through some of the bigger names signed amongst various teams. Let's just stay here in the AFC here really quick. I made mention of this guy, of this team earlier, so we might as well make mention of them again. Jimmy Garoppolo to the Las Vegas Raiders. 3 years, $72.75 million. Just a weird deal. 3-year deal there. It makes sense that McDaniels was probably going to go for a quarterback that he knew, and he knows Jimmy Garoppolo. So it didn't necessarily surprise me. Jimmy G, I saw a joke that someone was like, Jimmy G is a handsome Derek Carr. So it's basically the same, thing for that system. I feel like in terms of what McDaniels wants to run, I get a coach bringing in a quarterback that knows what they want to do. I do get it. But is this really going to make a difference for them? I don't think so. Because the future of Josh Jacobs is still in doubt because they franchise tagged him, but I don't think he's necessarily happy with this team right now. And who knows what Devontae Adams is like in terms of if he still wants to be there. He might have to be no matter what. But I think morale issues are the biggest thing for the Raiders going into the season. But do you think Jimmy G is the answer here, Justin? To at least, I don't even know what the answer is. No. I don't even know what the question is about the Raiders, what he could be the answer to. But you're saying no?
No. And look, Jimmy G has benefited on playing on some of the best teams we've seen in recent decades. The Patriots won the Super Bowl the year he started for them. The 49ers are one of the most complete teams in football and have been for the past several years. Yeah. Jimmy G is not a bad quarterback. I'm not saying that Jimmy G is not a good quarterback.
It's that team.
See the depth, and I don't see the level of play coming from the Raiders. I don't think they're nearly as well coached. I don't think they're nearly as deep. Yeah, the top of their talent is top of the league for sure. They arguably have a top 5 running back, arguably have a top 5 receiver. They have top 5 players along the defense. It's just not coming together. So I don't think signing a veteran guy like Jimmy G, who hasn't played a full season in the past, 4 or 5 years. Has he ever played a full season in his career?
I don't think so.
And yeah, he's got a winning record and he'll recognize the system, but he still needs to win games against the Chargers, Broncos, and Chiefs. So,
which is not easy. It's just
I don't see it. I don't see it happening.
Right. Fair enough. Two left tackles signing with some of the top teams in the AFC here. Jawan Taylor signs a 4-year, $80 million deal with the Kansas City Chiefs, $60 million in guaranteed money. So he goes from the Jaguars to the Chiefs. And then their now former left tackle, Orlando Brown Jr., signing with the Cincinnati Bengals, 4-year, $64 million, $31 million of that being signing bonus. Orlando Brown Jr. did pretty well for the most part, I thought, in Kansas City. Tacked on a couple more Pro Bowl selections. It shocked me he's not an all-pro. He hasn't made an all-pro team yet, which I think that just goes to show how stacked the left tackle position is in this league, relatively speaking. But Orlando Brown Jr., obviously, like his whole thing is he's wanted to be a left tackle. He started as a right tackle in Baltimore. He wanted to be traded from Baltimore because they paid Ronnie Stanley, and he wanted to become a left tackle on a team to get paid. Goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. Believe he played out last season on the franchise tag, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't going to get franchise tag 2 years in a row, and now becomes a Cincinnati Bengal. And the Chiefs replace him with a guy that, I'm not going to say I don't want to say he's worse because I think Jawan Taylor has become a pretty good left tackle with the Jaguars the last couple of years. But it was very interesting to see that, Orlando Brown Jr. signed for less in theory. He did sign for less on his contract, in terms of $64 million compared to $80 million over the same term. So I don't know what it is there, but even if we move on from that, maybe just the two sides just didn't want to return, which at the end of the day happens. What do you make of both those signings for those two teams? The Bengals, they've tried to make some runs at left tackles. Jonah Williams has been fine, has been nice. And they tried to help things out with Lyle Collins on that offensive line last year. Now they bring Orlando Brown Jr. in. And now with the Kansas City Chiefs, left tackle, it's been kind of, I don't want to say it's in flux, but at first they had Eric Fisher. Then he got hurt in the long run team. They trade for Orlando Brown Jr. Now they get Jawan Taylor. What do you make of the left tackle moves by the basically top two teams in the AFC?
I really like the move by the Chiefs. I think Patrick Mahomes was spending too much time running around last year. Don't get me wrong, he still made plays, he still looked excellent, but I think they want to try and keep him under center and keep him distributing the ball in a more comfortable position. It's the same thing with Joe Burrow. I don't know what their thing is though with signing supposed top guys that have been cut from their team. There's a reason they've been cut. They haven't had success with it lately. I hope it works out because the league is just better when Joe Burrow is on his feet and throwing the ball.
Right.
But we'll see. My question is Lyle Collins still under contract there?
I think he got cut, or he's supposed to get cut.
That's an interesting move because he really struggled last year there. I believe they also hired a new offensive line coach, if I'm not mistaken. I think they fired the guy from last year, but either way, uh, let's see if we can get Joe Burrow standing up, please, Cincinnati. Thank you, please, and thank you. And also, Joe Mixon struggled last year running the ball. I think that an offensive line would benefit him as well, which will only help the team.
Yeah, I'm just making sure and confirming because I believe I did see it.
Lyle Collins.
Yeah, I'm trying to see. I mean, maybe it's just the idea that he could be the cut, but I'm not sure. I'm not seeing it definitively official, but assuming he is.
I'm assuming he could still be a good lineman. Maybe they
Right.
move him inside. I mean, they're paying him. Just use him, or maybe they use him as a right tackle.
I was going to say, I think he might be the right tackle because I want to say Jonah Williams has requested a trade now that they got Orlando Brown Jr.
He did.
So, I mean, you get something back for Jonah Williams. You have Lyle Collins still there. You know, it could work out.
Yeah.
Or like you said, maybe move him to the guard and then you could just draft the right tackle in the draft. Like, it could work out. The Bengals are decent at drafting offensive linemen. Keyword decent, but
I don't think they are. They wouldn't be in this issue if they were.
You know what? Actually, fair shout. Fair point there, Justin. Very, very, very fair point. All right, moving on from that. I believe that's just about all the big names that have signed in the AFC. I just want to make sure I do my due diligence here. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, we know Gardner Minshew signed with the Colts. Calm down. Calm down. We know that they're going to.
That's where I started when all my fantasy players got hurt last year and my 50 points.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, well, okay. I don't know. I think I kind of want to save this for next week when Rick is back, Justin. But the Lamar Jackson saga is still ongoing, to say the very least.
Yeah, we'll get in depth. I'm sure Rick has lots of comments that I'd love to hear him talk about.
Exactly. So we can save that for next week. Aside from that, I think that's basically it in terms of the big names in AFC. Let's move back to the NFC side of things here. I kind of mentioned a couple teams that we were going to talk about momentarily. Well, here we are. Let's go to the NFC West because the NFC West made a couple of signings here that were relatively interesting. Two teams in particular. The San Francisco 49ers have been busy bees this offseason. A lot of depth signings for the most part here. They got Sam Darnold for themselves. They got Cleveland Farrell, the former Raiders top pick. Decent names with a big name here. 4 years, $84 million, $40 million guaranteed for Javon Hargrave. The former Philadelphia Eagle. We kind of talked about this, Justin, that the Eagles were expected to lose a good chunk of their players due to, just the salary cap. And despite the fact that we have made the joke on the show before that the salary cap is more of a social construct than anything, you could still lose pieces. And the 49ers, obviously, taking him away from there was big. The next team that I want to bring up here, the Seattle Seahawks, also been relatively busy. I think some decent value signings for them. I think Julian Love and Devin Bush are both really good value deals for Seattle. I think Julian Love on 2 years, they took him from the Giants, and Devin Bush on a 1-year deal as he tries to, prove himself. They took Draymond Jones, who had a decent year with the Broncos last year. But the big thing, my boy, Geno Smith, 3 years, $105 million, staying a Seattle Seahawk. Future Ring of Honor, ladies and gentlemen. But no, Geno Smith stays in Seattle. He signs. San Francisco takes a key defensive piece, one of the 4 guys on the Eagles defensive line that had double-digit sacks last year. Your thoughts on both those deals?
I'm sorry, which deals again?
Javon Hargrave to the 49ers and the future Ring of Honor member Geno Smith staying with the Seahawks.
Oh, yeah. I think it's a great move for Seattle. They needed that. I don't think they were getting quarterback in this year's draft. They obviously didn't have the draft capital, even though they do have the Broncos pick, I believe. But still, I don't necessarily know if that would have been the right move for them. They've had a very good offseason. So I think that their offseason moves will only complement this re-signing. So good on them. Good for them. I really love the Devin Bush and Julian Love signings as well for them. That'll help their defense, which struggled last year. The 49ers, the rich get richer. I mean, that defense was nasty last year. And for them to sign Hargraves, it's It sucks to play in that division. And also, I think that the Sam Darnold signing it's a good move for the Niners. It's a great move for Sam Darnold. Um,
Right.
so he goes back to SoCal, or I guess more like mid to northern Cali, but and then he'll benefit from being in that environment again, and he'll benefit from having arguably the greatest quarterback coach we've seen in a long time over in San Francisco. So
He can extend his career just by being a backup on this team. I was saying it. Either the 49ers or the Rams would have just made
he's
sense.
got the physical tools. It's been a weird kind of run for Sam Darnold because he's kind of been a bust, but like you still see flashes of his potential greatness.
And you can make
So
arguments as to why he's had the situation he's had. He started his career with Todd Bowles, then he had Adam Gase, which God rest your soul when you have that. And then the Jets trade him to Carolina. He had Matt Rule, which we know you've been firing him since, before we started this podcast. So at the end of the day here, he hasn't had the best situation. This is the best coach I was going to say. I was going to say here, Justin. So the Tommy John surgery was a success for Brock Purdy, but I think he's still supposed to miss at least the first couple weeks of next season.
I think he's supposed to miss more than that. I think that if
Right.
he had the surgery, the odds are he was going to miss the entire season.
I thought it was just going to be the first half, but maybe it is the entire season, probably for safety. But Brock Purdy is going to miss time, definitively. We're certain of that.
We don't know the status of Trey Lance.
Trey Lance is the thing, like, is the big sticking point. Because, again, ironically enough, because Sam Darnold, you guys picked him third, right?
Yeah, that was the year the Jets traded 3 seconds and a first to move up 2 picks to draft Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and so ironically enough, another former third overall pick here with Trey Lance, like, he should be, in theory, starting going in, but it's just not like, I think he'll be healthy by the preseason, but how it'll be playing in training camp, it's a wait and see. Maybe this is the opportunity Sam Darnold's been waiting for. This is going to be the coach that gets the most out of him. And who knew, for all the jokes I make, who knew that the third overall pick at quarterback that the 49ers needed, it wasn't their own guy they drafted. It was a guy the Jets drafted many years ago.
Let me say this. There's an issue that seems to persist with 49ers quarterbacks.
They get hurt.
And it's an issue that Sam Darnold has had in his career, where he has not played full seasons at certain points. He's not an injury-prone guy. It's not something that has been a serious issue, but in his tenure in Carolina, he had a few injuries after taking some hits, and he has missed time. So we'll see who's the starter and how long he lasts. You got to hope that he stays healthy. But I think it's an excellent move. It's going to be an underrated move when Sam Darnold comes in and just like lights up a team all of a sudden.
Do you think that the 49ers are going to be the first team to carry like 6 quarterbacks with them just because they know they can't have one finish the season? Be like, all right, just bring a platoon.
I don't think that, but it's an interesting concept.
I mean, hey, they might have the roster spots. You never know. You never know.
Call up Philip Rivers. Bring him back.
Oh, my God. Well,
Where's Brett Favre? Oh, he's in jail.
Not yet.
Allegedly.
We don't want to get sued like Pat McAfee here.
Yeah.
But, we'll I did not expect that. Oh, my God. Didn't another allegedly, Philip Rivers allegedly contacted the Dolphins and 49ers last season? Is that true?
When the quarterbacks went down, that's a rumor I heard.
That's hilarious. That's funny. You think they'd call up Philip Rivers' day after this season?
No, he's too far removed. He's a little older. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense to have him brought in.
I think it'd be funny. No, you know who they could bring in as a fourth quarterback? Just like a cheap 1-year deal? Come on, you should know who I'm thinking of here.
Steve Young.
No, Matt Ryan, but all right.
Oh, yeah. He's a free agent now.
He got cut from the Colts. He's played for Kyle Shanahan before. He'd be a great veteran quarterback.
No, I don't think he would.
No? Yeah, fair enough.
He wasn't a great veteran quarterback last year. I don't think he's got anything left in the tank.
I mean, I don't disagree. I just wanted to throw the name out there. But
yeah, look, I mean, if you wanted to bring him in as that like McCown quarterback coach kind of thing with no intention of him ever playing, and then God forbid something happens, you end up throwing him in there, sure. But I wouldn't expect him to be anything more than a third or fourth string quarterback, which realistically, again, it's not a roster spot.
Fair shot. All right. Let's finish things up here. The Philadelphia Eagles, as we kind of talked about them losing Javon Hargrave, they've lost a couple pieces, but they've actually done a decent job for the most part keeping their roster together. Yes, they did lose Miles Sanders, but they have both Boston Scott still there, and they signed Rashad Penny. I think that could actually be a decent value deal there because I feel like Rashad Penny's just been screwed when it comes to injuries in his career, and I think he could get a chance there in Philly, especially with that offensive line. Speaking of the offensive line, Jason Kelsey stays for one more year. One more year. With that team.
Next year.
Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham both re-signed on 1 year, very team-friendly contracts. James Bradbury signed a 3-year extension or a 3-year contract. Darius Slay agreed to a reworked deal of 3 years, $42 million going through the 2025 season. So, and they also got Greedy Williams, actually, which I think Greedy Williams could actually be pretty good there. The Eagles, for the most, they were projected to lose a lot, and they have lost a couple of guys, but I mean, for the most part, they kept Fletcher Cox and Brendan Graham as the veterans. They kept that defensive back crew relatively together for the most part, as more so when I'm talking about the defensive backs, like the two corners. So the Eagles have done a decent job on that aspect of things. The Washington Commanders, for Rick's sake, they kept Daron Payne after they franchise tagged him. They got him to a 4-year, $90 million contract, $60 million in total guarantees. Basically, setting the market between Aaron Donald and the next level of defensive tackles. That's what it is right there. That contract is going to be the baseline. And the Dallas Cowboys, biggest signing of the offseason, re-signing Cooper Rush. No, in all seriousness, it was kind of a joke that they didn't really do anything, but they, for the most part, we mentioned it. They traded for Cooks. They re-signed Leighton Vander Esch to 2 years, re-signed Donovan Wilson, got Gilly Locks, and they franchise tagged Tony Pollard. I think for the most part, that is just about all the big names who have signed. Zeke. They cut Zeke. Ladies and gentlemen, transition. So who's left? Who knows? All right. The Dallas Cowboys cut Ezekiel Elliott. The Philadelphia Eagles, last main remaining piece that's still in the free agency market, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Ironically enough, another Dallas Cowboy that's still out there, Dalton Schultz. A couple guys still out there, Justin. For a few of these guys, maybe the first three, if there's anyone I haven't mentioned that you want to bring light to, where do you think some of these guys could end up going to in terms of what makes sense for them fit-wise?
That is a good question. How about Dalton Schultz to Vegas?
Ooh, makes sense.
Down Darren Waller. They could use a good pass-catching tight end. It's something that Josh McDaniels is known for. And, I mean, his tenure in Dallas ended in a disappointment, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to spread the ball around, and he'll benefit from being, a second or third option in that offense, as opposed to being, a higher pick. He'll be a good safety blanket for Jimmy Garoppolo, because Jimmy Garoppolo does have experience and likes hitting his tight ends.
Makes sense. The reason I bring it up, so I saw an Instagram post about potential landing spots for Zeke Elliott. It wasn't that teams have already been rumored to start speaking to him. This was just teams that this post had showed for the potential. So this post shows the Cincinnati Bengals, the Buffalo Bills, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Chicago Bears as 4 teams. Or it says other team. Do you think any of those spots in particular would be good for Zeke, or is there somewhere else?
So I heard actually that the overwhelming favorite is the Buffalo Bills.
Makes sense. They need a running back.
They could use the help at running back. James Cook did come on the end of last year. He was doing very well for them. I believe Singletary is a free agent this year.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he signed or where he went, but they'll need a second running back there for sure. And that's what I heard. It would suck to have him in my division. Again, another talented player that I don't want to see twice a year, but we'll see. There's also a couple of running backs that are rumored to be traded as well. So, in Derrick Henry and Austin Eckler.
Right. They very much could be traded, or those teams are going to be able to find a way to work it out. Who knows? Well, I mean, Tennessee, I hope nothing good happens with them and Derrick Henry. Chargers, I hope you keep Austin Eckler. I like the Chargers. And kind of last but not least, in terms of the big names that I had mentioned, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the Eagles still want to bring him back. Other teams are trying to get in the mix for him. The last I saw, the Bengals were supposed to be a heavy favorite to get him, but nothing has happened there. I've read something, Justin, that says part of the reason why he hasn't signed yet is because maybe some teams are kind of, because he's played at a corner and safety in his career, and he's done well at both, especially safety last year with the Eagles. I'm really interested to see how a player like this, who had as great of a season last year for himself, I think he missed a couple games, and that's why he wasn't an all-pro selection because he played like an all-pro player last year. He tied for the league lead in interceptions. What do you think has been the sticking point of him not signing, and where do you think he's going to ultimately go once the contract is, put pen to paper? You could say.
I think it's gonna be more about the better teams. Obviously, he wants to play for a contender. Money is important, sure, but this is a guy that played really well last year, and there's a lot of top teams that needed help in their secondary. I expect the Eagles to make a very big push. He was traded there, and they had a great secondary last year. He played really well for them. It was an excellent trade by Howie Roseman in the offseason. If he does leave, yeah, I think Bengals probably would be the landing spot for him.
Yeah, I agree with you. It makes sense. And I think it really felt like it makes sense because they let Jesse Bates go. They let Von Bell go. But you got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in there, CJ GJ to make up for it. That felt pretty good to me for the most part. So I don't know. We're still expecting that. Hopefully that signing happens by next week. Hopefully a few of these guys get signed, and we'll have way more to talk about. Trust me, we will have stuff to talk about. Like we said, we've tabled a couple topics for future episodes, guys, and we've already kind of given you like a rundown of what the future is going to be like. We will be doing a mock draft again on this show. Amount of picks and rounds, patent pending. We're gonna have to figure that out. Hopefully it's just 3 again. Even then, that was quite the
3 was like a 2-hour episode, man.
Oh, that was like 2.5.
Yeah, that was a great episode though.
Well, in part because my Wi-Fi failed at some point.
I think both you and Rick had tuned out at one point.
Yeah, not surprising, all things considered. But hey, everything's been better since, so who knows? But there's going to be a lot to look forward to on the show here in the spring and the summer, and we're going to have some fun here, because more so last season, like we kind of hit it at the perfect time. We were going through things. I think we're going to have some fun this spring and summer. Would you say, Justin? I think we're going to have some really creative episodes.
As a Jets fan, this is always the best time of the year for me because my team is not generally good. So this is when I have hope. This is what I like talking about football the absolute most because you never know what can happen. It is a world of possibilities. And hopefully my team gets a new quarterback and these possibilities turn into hope again.
Indeed. So while we have that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Season 2 has begun for us. Quite the episode to get us started. Free agency is always a beautiful thing to be able to talk about, and there will be plenty more. Guys still have to go places. Guys who are franchise tags still need to basically agree. What's going to happen with the Raiders? Is Josh McDaniels going to continue to destroy that team one player at a time? Will Lamar Jackson play anywhere? Maybe he's going to leave the NFL next season. Who knows? That would be funny. But in all seriousness, there's still so much more to come in this NFL offseason. The draft is going to be building up. We have our own little shtick and humor that we'd love to do on the show for your all entertainment. And, that's all going to be on full display here in the spring and summer when we have fun. Because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, the Sports Agents of Chaos, we like to have fun. We like to talk football. And we like to cause just a little bit of chaos here and there. Thank you all so much for joining us. Rick, we can't wait to see you back from your darkness retreat next week. And for all of you who rejoined us here for the start of season 2, trust when I say it, it's going to be a fun time. Thank you all so much. We'll see you guys next week.